Alright everybody, it's time to have another grammar video. This one's about comma rules. There are 8 of them. And these can be kind of confusing, so if you need to go back and watch this again while you're doing your worksheet, I would recommend it very much. Okay, the first comma rule is using a comma to separate items in a series. So the example is, for lunch I had a sandwich, an apple, and a bag of chips. This comma here is optional. It's called the Oxford comma. And I think it makes sense because so I usually prefer to use it, because if you said, like, for breakfast I had toast, eggs, and orange juice, then if you don't have a comma here, I feel like these things seem like they should go together. And we don't want our eggs and orange juice mixed up. That would be really gross. So I think it's important to put this comma here. But not everybody agrees. Okay, the next rule here is using a comma and a coordinating conjunction. And if you remember, these are called the fanboys. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. And you use these to combine two independent clauses, which means they're complete sentences with a subject and a verb. So, look at this here. He was excited for the game after school, but he knew he would be tired. Do you see how it has a comma here and then a coordinating conjunction? We have the be in fanboys. So whenever you have a run-on sentence, you need to add a comma and a conjunction if you want to combine the two. We talked about that in our last video. Okay, the next one is using a comma to set off introductory elements. So an example of an introductory element could be something like this. After the game, he decided to go home and sleep. You could also have something like, well, I don't know. Well in this sentence is an introductory element. And when you say the sentence out loud, you can hear yourself stopping where the comma is. The comma helps us to remember that there's a pause there. Okay, this next one is a little trickier. The next rule is using commas to set off non-essential information. So what this means is it's information that you don't need to understand the sentence, so it's not required. Like if you take it out, the sentence still makes sense. So in this one, my sister Carrie, who has blonde hair, looks nothing like me. If you take out this, who has blonde hair, it still makes sense to say, my sister Carrie looks nothing like me. We don't need to know this detail for it to make sense. Another example of a sentence like this could be, my friend who is tall is nice. We don't need to know that your friend is tall to know that he or she is nice. Okay, in this next rule, this is where we use commas to separate coordinate adjectives. This just means two adjectives describing the same noun. So in this one, we have hairy and scary, and they're both describing monster. The hairy, scary monster came after me with his claws. This just tells us that hairy is describing monster and not describing scary. This rule we already talked about when we dealt with quotation marks, but you always have to use a comma with quotation marks, either after, either after the attribution before the quotation mark, or if you have something like this, then you do it inside the quote before you say who said it. So it either comes after who said it, if the quote comes after who said it, or it comes before who said it, if the quote comes before you say who said it. The next set are just rules that you have to remember, and they're always the same. So the first example is between a city and a state, like Hartford, comma, Connecticut. Between a date and the year, like June 15th, comma, 1997. Between a name and a title, when the title comes after the name, like Bob Downey, professor of English, or in long numbers, and the rule for that is generally like after 3 digits, you put a comma, and you should learn that in math class. Okay, so the last two we have are using commas to set off phrases that express contrast, which means there are two ideas in the same sentence, and they're the opposite of each other, like this. Some people really enjoy pizza, others don't. This is not a complete sentence, so we don't need a conjunction. We only need the comma. And then the last one is just any time that you need to avoid confusion in the sentence, you would include a comma. So like for this one, outside, the lawn was covered with branches. What this tells us is that the lawn is what's covered with branches. If you didn't have the comma, you might think that everything around the lawn, everything outside the lawn was covered with branches. So it kind of just keeps you from lumping that phrase together by putting the comma there. Commas are always used to either separate something to keep you from being confused when you're reading, or to help you to know where to pause when you read. So another general rule is if you stop where a comma is briefly and it sounds really wrong, it's normally not right. So remembering all of these rules and then helping yourself by reading your sentences with a lot of expression, pausing where your commas are, can really help you to make sure you're using commas correctly. Okay, now it's time to go ahead and try practicing the worksheet. If you need to come back to the video and look at the rules again, you can of course do that, and I hope this helped you.